For those of you who are still signing on, coming in, we are so happy that you all are here today. For years, we struggled with figuring out how to celebrate our Friend of Darwin and Friend of the Planet awardees because they're spread all over the country and even all over the world. And we are a very small organization and not one that can really pull off a giant awards event at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. And so for many years, what we tried to do was send the award to people's workplaces and have someone present the award to them at a faculty meeting or at a seminar or someplace that would be meaningful to them. But it meant that very few people were able to participate in the ceremony. And what I think has been the most fun about having these award ceremonies virtually is that all of the different awardees can actually kind of meet each other, and especially across the two awards, because although we at NCSE see an awful lot in common between the topics of evolution and climate change, and of course there is a lot of overlap, generally the people who win the Friends of Darwin Award know each other, or at least know of each other. And the same is true for the people who win the Friend of the Planet Award, but those two groups often don't know each other. And so that is a really fun part of this for you all to get to know your counterparts who are helping fight the good fight to have the science of these two extraordinarily important areas represented accurately and effectively, and that the public understands them and that teachers understand them. And really that we build an ecosystem around each of these topics that allow them to be taught in schools. The teachers feel like they've got a whole network of people who are helping them do this important job. So I think I'll go ahead and start to say that these awards have been given by NCSE in the case of the Friends of Darwin Awards for 30 years. And this is the 10th year that the Friend of the Planet Awards have been given. And so we like to say at NCSE that we do our best to reach as many communities and parents and especially teachers as we can. But there is just no way that a little organization in Oakland with 11 staff members and a small but mighty board can possibly reach everybody and do all the things that are necessary. And so every year we like to recognize those people who do make this ecosystem thrive and make it vibrant and bring the importance of these two areas of science to as many different publics as it's possible to bring them to places that we would never be able to reach on our own. And so we're really thrilled to introduce you to this year's awardees. It's a very diverse bunch, diverse in all kinds of ways. Like I said, our goal is to reach out into those places where NCSE by itself would not be able to, to make an impact. And so I'm looking forward to you hearing about them and then from them. And so we're going to get started with a brief introduction from Ken Miller, who is the president of the NCSE Board of Directors. He's been on the board for 12 years, Ken, is that right?
It's more like 10, but I'll go with 12.
Okay. But the really important thing, I mean, the most notable thing about Ken is that he, before he became a member of the Board of Directors, he was himself an awardee of the Friend of Darwin Award. So, he's done a lot of great things in his life, but that's pretty much the pinnacle, I think. Right, Ken?
You got it.
Okay. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Well, and thank you very much. And it's a real pleasure to be here, even if virtually. And I want to thank all of our attendees. And there's a bunch of you, so thank you so much for tuning in to watch us tonight. And I want to congratulate the awardees. And I want to say something about the National Center for Science Education, which is, you might say, an organization made necessary by events. And in the case of NCSE, the events were sort of the war on evolution that rose up in the 70s and 80s. And what happened was a high school biology teacher named Stanley Weinberg formed a loose organization called the Committees of Correspondence of individuals in various states who pledged to be resource people when the teaching of evolution was challenged in public schools. Unfortunately, those challenges didn't go away. They went up to a new level, and it was necessary to form an actual organization. And NCSE, again, made necessary by circumstances, celebrated its 40th anniversary a couple of years ago, and our work continues. And the best way I would describe what NCSE is here for is really very simple. And that is, we are trying to protect and nurture the scientific community of tomorrow, because that's what education is about. And threats to science education threaten, quite frankly, the future of the scientific enterprise. And it's by guarding, basically, the integrity of science education in our schools. And we have added, as all of you know, climate science as a special focus, along with evolution, pointing out the areas in scientific education that are really most threatened. With respect to the awardees tonight, and it's wonderful to see all of you, again, even if virtually. From my point of view, they fall into three categories. And the first of those categories is education itself. And there is an awardee in each category whose primary goal has been education, teacher support, and teacher training. The second category is public communication of science. And once again, one awardee in each category falls into that, trying to basically communicate science effectively to the general public at a time when, quite frankly, the public challenges to science are extraordinary. And then the third category is people who are in the scientific enterprise themselves and advancing our understanding by the active process of discovery. And all three of these are activities for which the NCSE basically wants to go to bat, wants to help out with, and wants to support. So I am absolutely thrilled to see the awardees here today. I think this is a wonderful substitute, pardon me, for an in-person award ceremony, if only because it's possible for all of our attendees to see and participate. And I'm very much looking forward to the remarks of the individual awardees. This is an exceptional time for science, and the work of NCSE and the work of our awardees is more necessary than ever before. Now, I can't go on without mentioning something, and that is, for more than the past decade, we have been blessed by an extraordinary executive director. And you just heard her introduce this session, and that is Ann Reed. Ann Reed took over this organization after its founding director retired. And the challenges that she faced were extraordinary. And in particular, she has not only been up to those challenges, she has surpassed them. NCSE at this point is a stronger organization, a more effective organization, and a more respected organization than ever before. We owe it to her vision, her professionalism, and above all, for her tireless energy in guiding this organization, expanding its scope, and remaining an effective voice for science education throughout the nation. And I can't tell you how much you have meant to me and to this organization. These are extraordinary times, and I think the greatest compliment that I can pay you is not only the fact that it's been a pleasure to work with you over the years, but the fact that as you step away from NCSE, you leave it in a better position than ever to carry on the work of the founders. And again, thank you so much for everything you have done. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Ken. Very kind of you.
And what I would like to do now is to turn the microphone over to Glenn Branch, who will introduce our first awardee.
Thank you, Ken. A recently retired middle school science teacher in Miami, Florida, Bertha Vazquez is also the Education Director for the Center for Inquiry, where she runs the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science, which provides professional development for science teachers specifically on evolution. With NCSE's encouragement, she conducted a comprehensive study of the treatment of evolution in middle school science standards, published in Evolution, Education, and Outreach. She received the National Association of Biology Teachers Evolution Education Award for 2017, and we're delighted to be honoring her today with NCSE's Friend of Darwin Award. Bertha, would you like to say a few words?
I am unmuting. Thank you so much, everybody. I love teaching and I love science, and I've been so fortunate to put those two things together for 35 years of my life. And as Glenn just said, I just retired after 34 years in the science classroom. My journey to TIES, the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science, probably started when I was 18 years old, although TIES was founded in 2015. I read The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, and it really shifted my paradigm. And I read all of his biology books, science books after that. I want to thank him for igniting my passion in evolution and science education, and for giving me the chance to start the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science under his foundation. It was founded, as I said, in 2015. And my goal was to share the passion for evolution education with my peers. And oddly enough, the very first thing that came out about the Teacher Institute for Evolution was in the NCSE newsletter, and it was called Sharing the Passion for Evolution Education. I mean, it's such a wondrous subject. And when I present and write TIES lessons, I think of that. I have that love for the subject in mind. Our motto is Teachers Helping Teachers, and TIES has really grown beyond my wildest dreams. Since its inception, we've presented over 350 workshops in all 50 US states. We've collaborated with school districts, zoos, universities, museums. And when schools closed in 2020, I quickly created asynchronous units. And asynchronous is a word that I never want to hear again. And I don't think any science teacher, any teacher in this country wants to hear the word asynchronous again. But I created asynchronous units for both middle and high school teachers immediately, because I knew that was the time of the year they were going to be teaching evolution. And those units were downloaded over 1,000 times within 2 weeks. So I thought it was a big deal. I wanted to thank all my donors, because everything we offer is free. We pay our presenters $250 to prepare and present for us. We have over 80 presenters around the country in all 50 US states. One of the greatest donors we have is Dr. Larry Bonchek, and he funded a book that we wrote called On Teaching Evolution, where 11 of our presenters got together and wrote down very practical advice for teachers all over the country. This is how you deal with misconceptions. This is how if you have only one day to teach this is what you teach, etc. My goal was always to honor teachers with high quality professional development. And I'd say the culmination of that was last June. Another donor paid for 29 teachers and a geologist to take a 10-day rafting trip in the Grand Canyon. And teachers basically went for free. And I can't imagine what their Earth history classes are like now when they go back, that they've lived, the history of the Grand Canyon. I have to say this effort is a collaborative one. I want to thank all these teachers that have joined me in the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science. It's a teacher-run project. I want to thank Kenny Coogan. He's my TIES associate. I don't know what I'd do without him. And of course, I have to thank the Center for Inquiry, especially our executive director, Robin Blumner, for believing in my vision. She allowed me to develop the program from a classroom teacher's point of view. And I think that's why we've been so successful. And finally, I have to say a few words about NCSE, because you do the two topics that I am most passionate about, which is evolution and climate change. When Ann Reed said you only 11 people, to me, you're so much bigger than that. As a teacher, I can't tell you how many times I turned to that website and to all of you for help. When TIES was founded, the first place I went was Oakland and visited your offices. And my goal is to make TIES as user-friendly and informative as the National Center for Science Education. I've had the honor of meeting both Dr. Eugenie Scott and Dr. Miller on more than one occasion. And in my opinion, they are the two greatest defenders of evolution education that we have in this country. I also want to thank you, Glenn. You've always been so kind to review my work and my book on teaching evolution. I want to end by saying that my other passion, as I said, is climate change education. I did a lot of that in Dade County and my school, Carver Middle School. And I'm currently under contract with Corwin Press to write a book on climate change education, which will be published in 2025. My co-authors are Kimberly Waite and Lauren Madden, and our wonderful editors, Debbie Harden. So you can, it's funny because the first chapter is already done, and sure enough, NCSE is there, and one of the studies that you conducted is there in that first chapter. So I will definitely be calling on all of you again. So just thank you, NCSE, for being such an ally in this effort to help teachers, and thanks again for this, here it is, this honor today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bertha. I remember that visit to Oakland 10 years ago. I was just a brand new baby executive director back then.
Yeah, because I turned to you as a model for what I wanted to make ties. So you're just 11 people. You're so important. You're so big. It's hard to believe.
We're small but mighty.
Exactly.
Our previous board president, Brian Alters, always used to say we punched above our weight. I'd like to take now to introduce Cathy Manduca, who was maybe the second person that I met. It's nice to see two people on this list who I have known now for a decade. Cathy is the founding director of the Science Education Research Center at Carleton College. She was also the executive director of the National Association of Geoscience Teachers from 2007 to 2019. NAGT is a group with which NCSE frequently works on matters of shared concern, particularly climate change education, of course. She's spearheaded a number of initiatives to extend and deepen geoscience education, including the Earth Connections Project, the Integrate Project, and On the Cutting Edge. Her honors include the American Geophysical Union's Award for Excellence in Earth and Space Education, and now NCSE's Friend of the Planet Award. Cathy?
Thank you, Anne. And I'm getting messages. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much. I'm just so tickled to get this award. It never entered my head that NCSE, which is an organization I just look up to so much, would recognize my work and honor me this way. And I'm just really pleased. So thank you very, very much. I first learned about NCSE when I was just a really young professional geologist coming into the field. And I was very concerned about the threats to the teaching of evolution. Geologists think that evolution is actually a part of paleontology, and that means it's part of geology. So we claim the whole thing. But anyway, I was really worried, and I didn't know what to do. And I learned about NCSE and the work that was being done to, essentially fight in the courtroom to protect the teaching of evolution. And I was just so in awe. It was not something I could, have imagined figuring out how to do. So that was my first interaction. And then as I came to work more with, came to be the executive director of NAGT, then actually when I was the president of NAGT, there was a book of creation science put on the science bookshelves at the Grand Canyon, and I was asked to write a letter expressing my concern, and I had no idea what to put in the letter. And of course, Glenn came to the rescue. And ever since then, every time I've had an opportunity to weigh in on an important issue about teaching science, then I call Glenn right away, and he's just been fabulous. So, and then as Anne came on and you expanded into climate education, that of course is a topic near and dear to my heart as well. And you've done such amazing work with teachers. And, I remember thinking, Anne, when I first met you and you first started, I wonder what she's going to do. And boy, did you do a lot. And it was so successful. And Amanda, I look forward to seeing what you're going to do next. I've just, in the last several years, have transitioned from being the director to the founding director of SERC, and watching those transitions at NCSE has really been a model for me as well. So thank you for all you do. You asked me to say a little bit about my work. My work has really all been about bringing educators together so that they could talk to each other about their work and learn from each other and share resources. And then also bringing in people to that conversation, groups together who ought to be talking to each other. So originally we started out bringing together geoscientists who at the time didn't talk about teaching much at all to each other. They spent a lot of time talking about research. And then got conversations going there. Then we started bringing in cognitive scientists, learning scientists, education researchers to help enrich that conversation. And then more recently, bringing together geoscientists, geographers, social scientists, all of the range of people that humanities people, all the range of people, engineers that you need to really start to address wicked problems, and helping them to learn from each other and then co-create teaching resources together. SERC was very fortunate to start right when the internet became very powerful, and as a consequence, we were able to develop some large websites for sharing resources and enable faculty and educators of all types to share with each other. I would say that none of that work is my work. I'm not really very good at working by myself, so that's all collaborative work. I want to thank tremendously the SERC staff. I can't program a computer, so you can imagine that the websites are not then the tools that make them are not my work. They're the work of Sean Fox and others at SERC, and the evaluation work has been led by Ellen Iverson, and the staff there has just been amazing and made it all happen. The content, which is what we're really known for, is all written by other people. We've collaborated with hundreds of PIs and faculty, and we have thousands of authors. And it's just, so this reward really honors the work of a community, not of an individual. So it's been a wonderful run, and I have really enjoyed the work and all the people I've gotten to work with, including all the fabulous people, the 11 strong but 11 million impactful group at NCSE. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Cathy. The discovery of Homo naledi was one of the most exciting events in paleoanthropology in the last few decades. And notably, the researchers have been extensively involved with related science education outreach, including with NCSE teacher ambassador John Mead. The Friend of Darwin Award is being conferred to the whole team, including the 6 intrepid underground astronauts who accessed the inaccessible Naledi chamber, in recognition of the collaborative nature of much of modern scientific research. Accepting the award on behalf of the team is Lee Berger, who was unable to attend live, but recorded a message for us. This may take a moment to load up. Our MC Paul O is working frantically behind the scenes to bring us Lee Berger.
I think maybe we should go ahead and hope that Paul can get that working. Paul, just start it running whenever you can. And we will go on to present the Friend of Darwin Award to Laura Helmuth. As the editor-in-chief of Scientific American, Laura ensures that there's a steady stream of high-quality popular articles on evolution and also climate change appearing in the magazine. And you can imagine with a name as broad as Scientific American, there are a lot of topics competing for attention there, and we have always really appreciated the attention to evolution in particular. She's also commissioned pieces on science education and threats to it from NCSA staff, including the founding executive director, Eugenie Scott, and Glenn Branch and myself over the years. She's been extensively involved in broader efforts to improve science education, for example, through the National Academy Standing Committee on Advancing Science Communication, Research, and Practice. We're very pleased to honor her today with the Friend of Darwin Award. Laura?
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. I'm so grateful to NCSE for all the work you do and for bringing us all together for this celebration. This is just a thrill and a wonderful occasion. So I'm the editor-in-chief at Scientific American. We are the oldest continuously published magazine in the United States. We've been around for 178 years, and our guiding mission throughout that time has been the idea that science is for everyone. Everyone should be welcomed into science, should be able to understand it, to use it, to be delighted, to be fascinated, to enjoy the fun of science and the serious side of science too. Some of our articles are used by teachers, high school teachers, college teachers. We are delighted when that happens. It's one of our biggest thrills, one of our biggest wins. But we also appeal to a lot of people who haven't had science education and were denied, that kind of fundamental right to understand how the universe works, how the whole world works, how all the life evolved on this amazing planet. And so we want to, give that, help people appreciate that gift at whatever age they're able to come to the study of evolution and to the understanding of climate change and the climate crisis and the climate catastrophe. That's what we do. We publish a lot of articles by scientists telling their own story, and I'm an editor, so I don't typically write myself, but I help other people write. I help other people make sure that their messages are clear and powerful and engaging and current. And it's a very satisfying job. Some of the people I think in the audience have worked with me. I know Ken Miller has written for me in past job. And it's a lot of work to write for the public. It's hard to do. But it's a very generous thing to do, to kind of share the story of your own research, of your own field. And we also publish a lot of science journalists who've devoted their careers to helping people understand how evolution works, how climate works, how the universe works. So it's an exciting type of work. As the science educators know too, and all the scientists, you learn something new every day. That's the best you could hope for. As Ken and Anne and Glenn have alluded to, the work has never been more important. We're seeing kind of a weaponization of the fear and confusion that some people have about science, and it's being intentionally stoked. And so I think we all need to work together to make it clear that science is a human endeavor. It's done by people who care, who are real people, who are not monsters, and that. And that you can trust the process of science. If not every single scientist, and certainly not every single journalist, you can trust the process as being iterative and self-correcting and always understanding more about the world today and how the world has existed, how the planet has existed for the past 4.6 billion years. So I'm really grateful to everybody who participates in public outreach, who communicates with and to, but especially with the public. I think one of the kind of crises in journalism right now is there's this principle of telling both sides of every story and letting the reader figure it out. And that's kind of a principle of a lot of political journalism, especially. And I think where science journalism has a lot to offer the world of journalism is to say that, sometimes there aren't two sides to every story. When it comes to, creationism and evolution, there's one side that's true and one side that's not. And the same with climate science versus climate denialism. And it's really important for people who are telling stories and amplifying stories and using their platform to share what's new and what's known with the public, to make it clear, here's what we know, here's how we know it, and why it's really important that you understand as well. So I'm grateful to everybody who works toward these efforts, and super grateful to NCSC for the work you do. Thanks again so much, and it's great to be here.
Thanks very much, Laura. We're going to try again to run the message from Lee Berger. Just a moment, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lee Berger, head of the Rising Star team that studies Homo naledi. I'm sorry that I can't be with you. I'm here in Johannesburg, South Africa. But on behalf of the over 140 scientists and explorers involved in the Rising Star project and the study of Homo naledi, I'd like to thank you for bestowing on us the Friend of Darwin Award. We, as a team, have worked extremely hard over the years for science communication, for bringing people into the behind-the-scenes moment of discovery, and also allowing them on the journey, following us as we examine these remarkable fossils. I can assure you that our teams are working in the field just behind me, about 40 kilometers away, on a daily basis. There are new discoveries to come. What we've learned over the last decade is both the excitement and enthusiasm of people around the world for following live science, live exploration, and we intend to continue that and increase our efforts in this area of science communication. But we also feel deeply passionate about letting you behind the scenes of science itself, how science is done, pulling back the curtain. We think that makes better science. We think the open access models that we try to achieve are the way forward, and we truly are honored by this award. I hope someday that I can meet you. I know that the whole team is filled with gratitude, and I assure you that we'll continue exploring, continue communicating, and of course, the message that our team always gives out, because there's always more to find, is never stop exploring. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next up is Susan Joy Hassol, who is the Director of Climate Communication, which publicizes climate change, supports climate scientists, and assists journalists in covering climate change. Hassol herself speaks and publishes widely on current topics in climate change and climate communication. She served as the senior science writer on 3 national climate assessments. She also led an NSF-sponsored project to provide training and resources to journalists covering climate change. She has received awards for climate change communication from the American Geophysical Union and the Climate Institute, and we're pleased that the Friend of the Planet Award will join them on her shelf. Susan, would you care to say a few words?
Thank you so much, Glenn. I'm so grateful to NCSC for this honor, and I'm so pleased to share this celebration with so many others that I hold in such high regard. I really appreciate all of their work and the work of NCSC. I'm especially pleased to be named a Friend of the Planet because I feel like calling someone a friend is perhaps the highest honor. It's also a reminder that my more than 3 decades working in the communication of climate change, which sometimes felt like the climate wars, have not only been bearable, but joyful, because the company in the trenches is so good. I've had the opportunity and the pleasure of working with so many scientists, getting to know them personally. Some of them I have come to truly call friends, and without whom I would not be here accepting this award. So please allow me to extend my really strong personal thanks to the brilliant climate scientists, Bob Carell, Jerry Melillo, Richard Somerville, Michael Mann, and Ben Santer. I am so grateful for their leadership, support, advice, and belief in me. I've learned so much from all of them, and I treasure all of our collaborations. Their confidence in me and their sense that I was bringing something to the table really helped to give me the confidence to do everything that I've done. They are my dear friends, and they are friends of the planet. I also thank my mom, Harriet Hassol, and my daughter, Shayna Breeze Heedy Hassol, and I thank my partner, Rich Lotstein, whose boundless support makes it possible for me to do the work that I do. He's my sounding board and my very best friend. So I've long been focused on the power and importance of language when it comes to communicating about climate change. And there are so many examples of this almost every day. But the use and abuse of language by the enemies of climate action has been on full display at the United Nations Conference of the Parties in Dubai over this past week. I always say words matter. And at the COP, they matter because they convey ambition, commitment, or the lack thereof. So we're currently seeing a debate play out between whether we should phase out fossil fuels or phase down fossil fuels. Now, of course, everyone except the fossil fuel industry knows that we must phase them out. But, you know, there are also arguments over the word unabated. Should we say phase out unabated fossil fuels? It's the ultimate weasel word. It's really just a backdoor to allow for continued use of fossil fuels. And using this word implies that there is a reasonable and feasible way to abate fossil fuel burning. But the technology hasn't ever been proven at scale. And even if it worked, it would cost trillions of dollars a year. To expend those kind of resources to capture and sequester carbon just so we can keep burning dirty fuels, it seems so silly to me. It's already sequestered. Just leave it in the ground. And of course, it's moot anyway, because Saudi Arabia's already said that they would never agree to any language to phase fossil fuels down or out. So clearly the rule that gives any one country veto power has to go. But that's a story for another day. Watching battles over language like this continue to play out when it's long past time to get way more serious about urgent action. It would be easy to succumb to cynicism or despair, but we can't afford to. There's not a moment to waste. As Michael Mann has so eloquently put it, there's urgency, but there's also agency. We have the technologies we need. They're abundant and affordable. We know what kinds of policies work. And as soon as we zero out the heat-trapping pollution, the problem will stop getting worse. So on we go. Try to do as much as we can, as fast as we can, to preserve this beautiful planet for our children and for all life on Earth. So I'm very proud to be a friend of the planet. And I thank you again.
Thank you so much, Susan. I think you can all see why she won this award. She's really, really good at this. You remind me, I take a 1-minute detour. My very, very first job out of graduate school was at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris. And I was there for 3 years. And during that entire 3 years, the part of the organization that I was working with, the International Computer and Communications Policy Department, was debating a free flow of information agreement. It's a bilingual organization, English and French. We spent the entire 3 years talking about whether free should be translated as gratuit in French, which is without cost, or libre, which is without restraint. And that's when I decided to go back to school and become a scientist. But I'm so glad that there are people who are willing to fight through those language battles and get to real policy. And I'm about to introduce someone who probably has a fair dinkum of experience with that, given his career. Dr. David W. Titley is an affiliate professor of meteorology and international affairs at Penn State, where he also founded the Center for Solutions to Weather and Climate Rise. Before entering academia, however, Dr. Titley was Admiral Titley, a naval officer, and in his 32 years of service, he rose to the rank of Rear Admiral, served as the chief oceanographer of the Navy. Bet you didn't know they had one of those, and initiated the Navy's task force on climate change. After leaving the Navy, he was the Deputy Undersecretary of Commerce for Operations at the National Oceanographic and Oceanic, always get that wrong, and Atmospheric Administration. And he's justly famed for his TED Talk on how the military fights climate change. I mentioned at the beginning of this award ceremony that we are so grateful for the people who carry our message to audiences that we would never be in front of. And certainly, I think most of us don't even think about the military as a place where we would find allies in the fight for climate change education. I think, the stereotype is that the people who care about climate change are the hippy dippy tree huggers and not the military, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. And Dr. Titley spent his career making sure that that message gets spread far and wide, and it gives him credibility in places where we might not be heard. He is not sitting on a balcony in South Africa. He's sitting in the United Club at the Newark airport. So we are especially grateful, David, that you are willing to take the time to meet with us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Anne, and really thanks to you and Amanda, Ken, and all the supporters and staff of NCSE who really made this award possible. This was honestly a huge surprise to me, and I'm really, really humbled. And I think what makes me feel kind of humbled as much as anything else is when I look at the names of the past recipients of this award. I mean, they're really giants in the field of climate change and advocacy and education. Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming, actually. So I'm sure as many in the audience know, our climate messages, generally resonate best when they, address the concerns of that audience and use words and phrases and examples that resonate with, with their everyday experience. And hopefully you have some credibility or trust with that audience as well, and that helps. So like when I started to talk about national security and climate change as Oceanographer of the Navy, as Anne mentioned in Task Force Climate Change, to say that climate and national security was a niche topic would be kind. But a core value of our senior Department of Defense leadership, and this is really both civilian and military, is readiness. And what readiness means is basically, do we have the right tools, the right training, maintenance, tactics to prevail and succeed in our assigned mission, whatever that may be, even, or maybe I should say especially, when somebody is shooting at you. And that really was my primary framing mechanism when introducing climate change as a legitimate national security issue, was through the lens of readiness. So it wasn't showing Keeling curves. It wasn't talking about polar bears and all this sort of thing. It was talking about, how are we going to prevail in the Arctic? What are we going to do as our infrastructure gets threatened by extreme weather, rising sea levels? How do we use this to help our strategic position in places like the Middle East, like the Pacific Indo region, which is so very important for many things. As Susan and everyone probably here knows, simple messages repeated often, maybe a little bit of humor. So this doesn't sound like haranguing or preaching, or like you just had to go visit your dentist who just ran out of Novocaine on the previous patient. So how to communicate in a way that people will hopefully at least listen to you and not immediately just pick up their phone. And I'm happy to say that, fast forward to the end of 2023, and I would say that the concept of climate change adversely impacting our national security is now really, really well known. It's in many strategic documents. It's in national and international assessments of climate change. Multiple think tanks now study this issue. The National Academy of Sciences has reported on this topic. And it's also quite often now a topic of congressional hearings and briefings. But all of what I just mentioned is so much more effective when you can work with an audience that has a basic science background, and science like based on science. And so I'm really super grateful for all the work that the NCSE has done on picking, arguably maybe two of the hardest issues, for all the reasons to communicate and to educate that next generation, so that when my successor is talking to some audience about this, you can have a discussion based on facts, and that's so important. So nowadays I'm working in some different fields. I recently started a company to help RVers manage weather risk more effectively. And along with my wife, we volunteer each year for about 6 months of the year in Grand Teton National Park, which, if you can see the picture behind me, this is the famous Snake River overlook where Ansel Adams took one of his iconic Rocky Mountain pictures. This is April, when we still had snow back there. And we work the wildlife brigade, and we really manage the human interface between bears and other wildlife and the 3 million plus visitors that come to our park. And we try to enable safe and ethical viewing of that wildlife. So if you're ever up in Grand Teton this summer, I may see you on the roadside at a grizzly bear jam. Stop by and say hi. But no, I do still get to work a little bit in climate communication. So our park rangers up in, again, Grand Teton, really on the front lines with our visitors, those 3 million get a lot of climate questions. And I've had the privilege of being able to help them think through communications techniques. How do we answer these things? Methods that, again, will help them effectively connect with and educate our visitors so that they'll understand the value of keeping places like Yellowstone, like Grand Teton, and so many others, and impacts that we are already seeing in these parks. So again, I just want to thank you for this wonderful honor and award. I'm very humbled, and I want to thank again everybody who helped me personally both understand and communicate the challenges of what I would argue is the greatest shaping issue for the 21st century. So thank you.
Thank you, David. We have a very small amount of time for questions. I have one question for each awardee who is here. And I would ask you to really pull out all of your communication skills and answer these questions in about 90 seconds each. Okay? Challenge accepted? All right, here's the first question. This is for Bertha. What effective solutions have you found in the classroom to combat the rise of scientific and medical misinformation? It seems to be that, not only is there a lot of disinformation, but a lot of it seems to be being weaponized, that makes the problem even more serious. And we certainly don't want to implement government censorship. So what is the most effective solution to your mind?
Yeah, I think my fear there is that there's just this fire hose of misinformation right now. And I'm scared that if people don't know how to discern the difference between credible versus non-credible information, they're just going to throw away all information. They're just going to say, oh, I never believe anything science says, or I never believe anything the news says. That's really depressing. And of course, the answer is education. I hate to put yet another societal responsibility on teachers. So I stress that education is, everyone needs to be a part of it. Journalists, medical professionals, even just individuals should adopt healthy habits of mind, healthy skepticism. That's why I work for the Center for Inquiry. That's what we do. We address claims made without sufficient evidence, everything from psychics to homeopathy. And I think the most important thing we need to instill in our students and in ourselves is humility. When you read about vaccines, the shape of the earth, evolution, it's easy to point your finger at the person who believes that the earth is 6,000 years old and think, how can they believe that? But I am sure that all of us here, we all hold mistaken beliefs about something. We can't be right about everything. So we must teach our students and ourselves that we can be wrong. And that when you encounter a new piece of information, you should stop and think. And remember that you're more likely to accept it if it fits your already established belief system. Your own biases and tribal affiliations can affect what you accept as true or not. And the second thing is media literacy. Several states are starting to implement media literacy standards in their state. And just this morning, I spoke with Dr. Faith Brogow. She has a book on media literacy. She says we need to add 2 more R's to the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. We need to add reasoning and reflection.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I got to cut you off because we got too many other questions to get to. That was great. Thank you, Bertha. Cathy, I think this might be a one-word answer. Someone asked, I feel that what American science education needs is for earth sciences to be required at the high school level. Do you agree?
I certainly believe that if the populace was better, all the publics, I like the way you say it, was better informed and better educated about the way the earth works, we'd be in a much better place, because it would contribute to that humility if we all were better prepared to deal with the earth as the complex system that it is. The second part of that question was, do you think this is likely? The next generation science standards, which are the guidance, the national level guidance for teaching science, recommend our science and have strong, very, very good standards for our science content and cross-cutting themes and ways of knowing. And the best thing we can do is to help support that. The most likely way it's going to be implemented is by a infusion in a lot of different parts of the curriculum, unfortunately. And I think it would be better if we had Earth science. But in the meantime, building that ecosystem that you alluded to and is our best moment, because then we have redundant ways for people to learn about the Earth.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Laura, this might be a short answer too, but you'll need to explain a little bit why you chose it. What would you say is the most important article on evolution that Scientific American has published during your tenure as editor-in-chief? You can't go back to 1878.
Thanks so much for asking. So I put a couple of links I sent to Glenn. I think he'll be able to share it with the whole group. So the first is just a list of all our evolution articles. We run something about evolution every couple of weeks, and I just love them all. How did dinosaurs get so big? How did birds diversify? Starfish being heads? Why do so many animals develop a crab body plan? And this is going to sound like pandering, but it's absolutely not. Whenever I give a talk about the importance of science communication, I end with an article that Glenn Branch and Ann Reed wrote for us at Scientific American about actual progress, which sometimes we forget to notice the things that have gotten better. And this article is about a couple of surveys. So in 2007, 51% of high school biology teachers taught evolution as evolution and not some alternative or not some fringe idea, and even mentioned it. And just half, not a great proportion. And then in 2019, 67% of public high school biology teachers were teaching evolution as just basic standard science, what you need to know to understand biology. So I think it was a really good article. I share it all the time to let people know it can get better. We worry a lot about misinformation, disinformation, people not being given or being denied the facts they deserve. But we, NCSE especially has made this happen, has made a ton of progress in how people are being educated.
Thank you, Laura. I promise we did not plant that answer. That's very kind of you. And of course, we are not the only ones at all responsible for that incredible improvement in evolution education, but we like to think we played a small part, and we were so thrilled to get those results in 2019. Susan, in light of your 3 decades of experience, one of our participants asked, I'm curious to know what areas of climate change communication are, in your opinion, most neglected or most in need of improvement?
Several things come to mind. The first one is got to be bridging the partisan divide on climate change in the US. We thought we had, the right messenger and the right messages, and that would be key, but we haven't cracked the code. It hasn't worked out as well as we'd imagined, and we still have a very large partisan divide. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. There are no Republican or Democratic thermometers. Everybody's suffering the impacts of the increase in extreme weather. So we just need improved strategies there. Second, I would say we're not doing as well as we could at painting a picture of the better world that we can create through climate action. The frame that I think most people think about when they think about solutions to climate change has to do with sacrifice and suffering and what we're going to have to give up and do without. And I think that's really a mistake. Moving from dirty energy to clean energy and protecting our forests and other natural lands would make it a better world. It'll be a healthier, safer world. It'll be better for our personal health and better for planetary health. And third, I think we haven't yet effectively tapped into people's number one motivation, which is love. Acting on climate will help us protect what we love for who we love. And there's new research that shows that globally, by far, the top motivator of climate action is protecting the planet for our children and future generations. Most people don't focus on the scientific details of temperature targets and dates. They're focused on their families and the communities. So I think we can do a better job of tapping into that desire to leave their children a better world. And I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Anne.
Oh, thank you, Susan. I love that answer. David, clearly during your military service, you were probably in a position to communicate about climate change with people who have a deep respect for the military, but deep skepticism about climate change. And this questioner says, you must have some good stories. So do you have an example of a situation where you were talking to someone who perhaps started out hostile and came around?
So I have lots of stories, but I also have here the clock that shows 90 seconds. So I'll start that now and see what we can do in 90 seconds. Early on in Task Force Climate Change, one of the things we did, like any bureaucracy, is, we have periodic meetings with really all the primary stakeholders. In the US Navy, those are really the 4-star admirals that basically run the Navy in the Atlantic, Mediterranean, Middle East, Pacific. So we're going around and, I'm honestly not quite sure how all of this is going to resonate. It's, we're not shooting things. I'm not coming up with a big new missile system or fancy submarines. This is like, what's he talking about? And the representative, the person who got tagged at the Pacific Fleet, I was saying, well, I'm sure, you probably don't have anything. And he did. This is a full colonel in the US Marine Corps. And he went on through all the islands, all the nation states, on how this is back in 2009, how this was already becoming a topic, and the fact that if we could add some leadership here and interest, and not to mention resources and capabilities that we can do in non-combatant situations, what a leveraging effect, what a multiplier effect that is for US strategic gains. And I would say that was really, something that you're kind of expecting. It's like, this isn't real. You're just making the stuff up. To, hey, this is actually really important. And as we know, the best thing is when you're not the one with the message, but now somebody you were talking about is now amplifying that same message, and they will bring their credibility to that. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Thank you. Ken, we have a question for you. One of the participants says, huge fan of your work. I'm a non-religious person and my wife is religious almost to a creationist and literal interpretation side. Right now, our solution is not to talk about it. Do you have any recommendations as far as videos or books that could be used to gently bring the topic of evolution to the forefront and have civil discussions with people about it? Mainly my wife. So put on your couples counseling hat and make some recommendations.
Thank you. I now begin my career as a marriage counselor. Much appreciated for that question. The first thing I'd ask is how long have you been married? How strong is your marriage? Hopefully you can bring these things up. The first recommendation I would really have is for an organization called BioLogos, BIOLOGOS. It is an explicitly Christian organization dedicated to the understanding of evolution in a religious context. They have wonderful videos and articles, and I think, speaking to the questioner, I think your wife might really, really find this enlightening. The second thing I'd recommend is a book by Francis Collins, who, the very eminent scientist who headed up the Human Genome Project and later the National Institutes of Health. It's called The Language of God. Francis is a committed evangelical Christian. You'll discover that very quickly from reading his book, but he's also a scientist in every respect. And he talks about the compatibility of an understanding of evolution with religious thinking. I also wrote a book about this myself many years ago called Finding Darwin's God. And as a person of faith myself, I tried to weave that science into my faith understanding of existence on this planet. And then finally, the questioner asked about videos. Nova did a marvelous 8-hour series on evolution quite a while ago, about 20 years ago. The final video in that series, the final program, and this was intentional, is called What About God? And there's some extremely thoughtful people grappling with the question of religious identity and evolution. And I think your wife would really enjoy watching this video. It's available on YouTube. Just type in The Language of God, Nova, and you'll find that video right there. I wish you many, many more years of happy marital bliss. And I thank you for the question.
Thank you, Ken. before we go, don't anybody leave. I know it's a minute past the time, but this is very important. As Ken mentioned at the beginning, NCSE is going through a transition. I am retiring, actually retired as of this Monday. And our new executive director is Dr. Amanda L. Townley. We've been working together closely for a couple of months now. She's absolutely fantastic. NCSE is in great hands, and I wanted to make sure that you all had a chance to meet her this evening. Amanda?
Thank you so much, Anne. Anne and everyone at NCSE have been tremendous resources. I just want to thank everyone, all of you, for joining us today as we celebrate the accomplishments of each of our awardees. There is much work for us, or much work to be done to reach our goals in science education, but the actions and advocacy of each of these individuals help make those goals more attainable. I'm reminded of the adage about how it takes a village to rear a child, and will amend that to add that it takes collective villages to rear scientifically literate generations of children. Together, we will ensure that one day all students will have the opportunity to engage with the evidence, and each and every one of you make that possible. It's an honor to be a part of it.
Thanks, Amanda. And I'll see you from the participant lane next year. Thank you all so much for being here. This was recorded, and the video will go up on YouTube as soon as Paul can make that happen. So you can refer your friends and colleagues to that. And with that, I say good evening, and thanks again for joining us. And thank you so much for supporting NCSE, and to all the awardees for all of the work that you do. Thanks. Good night.